Welcome to another edition of The Chat. I'm Catherine Glaspie, Public Information Director for Chatham County. And behind the scenes today is Nick Beard, our video producer. Hello, Nick.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to The Chat.
So Nick is not on camera with us, but you may hear his voice throughout the episode because he may have some questions to throw in there. And also joining me today is...
Hi, I'm Abby Murphy. I'm the Public Information Assistant for Chatham County. And joining us here is Dr. Harper. Good morning.
Hey guys, good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Harper. You have been on a couple episodes of The Chat with us in the past, and you've told us a little bit about yourself, but tell us again in case they haven't seen another episode.
So, I'm a veterinarian. Graduated from the University of Georgia, go Dogs, in 2002. I've been private practice for many, many years up until I don't remember the exact year, 2016, 2017, where I came to work at the animal shelter. I was a veterinarian there, and then I was moved up into the position of director, and I've been director there for almost 2.5, almost 3 years.
Wow, that seems hard to believe that it's been that long.
Wow, yeah.
We're so happy to have you as our director over at Animal Services. You've done a lot of things. I think while we've talked about in other episodes, it's not necessary for the Animal Services director to be a veterinarian. It does kind of change the dynamic that you are. Because you're able to assess the animals a little bit more, make sure everybody's healthy. You know more about the process in which you need to keep animals healthy, all those things. And I want to mention right off the bat that we do have other episodes of this podcast with you. We've talked about rabies vaccinations and why you should vaccinate your animals. We've also talked about our adoption center over at 7211 Sally Mood Drive. They're open 6 days a week, yes, every day except for Wednesday, from 1 to 4:30 for people to come in and adopt animals. We always have a plethora of animals to look through that are needing good homes, so we encourage that. I kind of want to today talk about the other stuff that Animal Services does. You guys, you handle a lot of things that don't have to do with adoptions and you don't have to do with rabies. So let's talk about that a little bit today. Give us an idea of what some of that is.
So we used to be animal control. And I think that's why we were established at first, because there is, just across the country and across Georgia, there are issues that need to be dealt with. Whether it's stray animals, whether it's animals that bite, whether it's dangerous animals, those kind of things. So there was animal control. And then from that, we kind of evolved over the years. After we left the police department, came over to the county, we became Animal Services. So the adoption part of it is kind of a byproduct of what we really do. And as Animal Services, we're responsible for enforcing all the ordinances, all the animal-related ordinance in Chatham County. That includes Savannah. We help out in the municipalities. But mainly we're focused on unincorporated Chatham County and city of Savannah.
Right.
That's anything from dogs at large to nuisance animals to bite cases to, just issues with domestic animals, dogs and cats.
Yeah, you guys don't deal with wildlife.
We don't deal with wildlife. We, that typically can be referred out to the Department of Natural Resources. We can assist sometimes, but that's not our focus. Our focus are domestic animals. We are complaint based as far as that. As far as the service part of our processes, we're complaint based, meaning we aren't. While we do patrol and we are driving, officers are driving around, driving around the county. It's not something where, if they see a stray dog, they don't necessarily go pick it up.
Okay.
I mean, it kind of depends on the officer, but because of the staffing that we have, we're complaint based. I mean, if you would call us for service, call for, if you notice a stray dog in the neighborhood, if you notice something that you think might be, suspicious as far as neglect or cruelty, something like that, then that's something to call us about. That's something that we will go out and investigate and do that with. It's not something that we, like I said, we're not out there all the time doing patrols like you would with the police department where they're doing it. The police department does some of this stuff too, but our main focus is just on animal related things.
So let's talk about if you have an animal that has bitten you, your neighbor's cat or dog bit you. What happens then?
So that's an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And typically, it wouldn't be the wrong thing to do if you were bitten by an animal to call 911. 911 would route the call to route the dispatch to one of our officers. One of our officers would be out dispatched. The police department would probably be dispatched as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we assist them in filing bite reports, and going through the processes, contacting the health department. The health department contacts you as far as what to do with yourself.
Right.
As far as the animals go, ideally, when we have bite cases like that, if it's a known animal, we'd like to know where it is, where it lives, so we can investigate that, the vaccine status of the animal.
Sure.
Those things. If it's an unknown animal, it's a stray. If it's possible to contain that animal, that's the ideal situation because, as we talked about in our rabies talk, rabies is the biggest thing to deal with bite cases. If we have the animal,
Mm-hmm.
we can go through processes to determine whether or not it's been vaccinated for rabies or test it for rabies. That's a whole nother ballgame. But the biggest thing is having the known animal. If we don't know the animal, if it's it's a stray dog that runs off into the woods, then the assumption has to be made that animal is rabid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In that case, that opens up the whole ball of wax. Going to the doctor, getting rabies prophylaxis, that kind of stuff. But it's always a decision that your doctor makes. It's not our decision. But that's what I always tell people. If you're bitten by an animal, attacked by an animal, scratched, whatever, try to contain the animal.
Okay.
And if you can't, it's okay.
Yeah.
But, give us an idea. We can try to, we've had times where we've had dogs attack people that we've put dog traps out to try to catch the dog because a known dog in the neighborhood that we've been looking for, that kind of thing. But no, the biggest thing is to report bites. We have, I talk a lot about bite cases with people, and, we get a lot of bites that aren't reported. Even bites of your family dog to your kids or yourself or whatever, those should be reported. It doesn't criminalize them. It doesn't mean that they have to be,
right,
euthanized or they have to be quarantined or anything like that. Typically a bite is quarantined. If they're current on rabies, they can be quarantined at your house.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to know these things happen because we see a lot of really serious bites that may or may not have been prevented if the earlier, more minor bites had been reported.
Right. Sometimes it can be an education of how to handle your animals. Animals, if you have them, that you don't come up to them and you don't just start poking on them because
Right.
they're going to bite you. And a lot of times that happens with young children. I know you've experienced this with your daughter, and you have a young daughter and a dog. She can't just go up to Zelda and go,
no, we've been teaching her boundaries, and yes, pet the dog here. Don't pet her tail. Don't poke her in the face. Yeah,
right.
We've been trying to teach those boundaries because they'll get irritated, and honestly, rightfully so, because you wouldn't want that either.
Exactly. And I think sometimes the education on those things are very important.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to have a dog that's just aggressive,
Right.
And you're going to have bite and that kind of thing. Let's kind of go down that line for a minute, and let's talk about aggressive dogs and dangerous dogs.
Right. So we want you to report anything, we want those things reported. If we have aggressive, dogs that are like chasing people, dogs that are, acting aggressive in any manner, those are emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Those are kind of our priority calls. And those are priority calls 24/7. Like if that happens at night, then typically what happens is you call 911, 911 contacts an officer that's on call, and they go out with the officers. At night, we typically have to be, a police officer has to be with us for safety purposes.
Sure.
But we'll go out on these aggressive dog calls. Typically, those are ones that we hopefully contain those dogs. We hopefully can catch those dogs. But what I will tell people, and this is something it can be frustrating for the public, it's frustrating for us, is typically dogs at large that are just at large will remain at large. The highest percentage of them, they just do. Like there's so many places for them to go. There's so many things that they can do that we don't catch. It's not like you watch the old Droopy cartoons
Right.
with the dog catcher. Like he's out with a net catching every dog, never misses a dog. It happens. And in those cases, we have other things, setting up traps and those things that we can set in areas that are problems. Our officers do carry dart guns with them. They are able to dart these, but it's a sedative in the darts. The problem with that is it's not like the movies where you get, they give you an injection or a dart and you immediately go down. These animals are still moving around, so we don't like to do them in a populated area. We don't like to use dart guns around a lot of people. We don't like to use dart guns around real busy streets because these animals become sedated and stumble into traffic and get hit by a car and then cause a whole another mess. We don't like to do it by bodies of water because same thing. You dart them, they run off into the woods, something happens, and we end up a dog that we've darted to catch ends up dying from some other reason. So we're not haphazardly using the dart guns, but we do have them. I always, the biggest thing I can tell people is, with aggressive animals, especially when they're charging you or whatever else, that's really not the greatest time to use a dart gun because it doesn't stop them from attacking people.
Sure.
It's like when you see these reports of animals escaping from the zoo. It's unfortunate, like with tigers that escape from the zoo, running rampant around a community, they don't dart those. They usually shoot them.
Yeah.
Because there's just no way around it. There's no instantaneous sedation that works. But they do have dart guns for aggressive animals. And those are things that we take very seriously. We go out, we try, but we also need community help because, sometimes we'll have dogs that are loose in the neighborhood and we get the complaint. We go out and say, hey, can we set a trap up, which requires someone to monitor the trap. Well, sometimes people will do it. Sometimes people won't. We also have traps that we set up to catch an animal that may be aggressive, and we get a report that's an animal in the trap, and then someone lets the animal out of the trap. So,
right,
we need to take these things a little seriously when we're trying to do things, and it's harder for us to do them without the public's help.
And let's talk about dangerous dog for a second, because that is a designation. It's a court-ordered designation.
Yes, it is.
And it has a lot of... It takes a while to get to that designation, but then the designation also holds quite a bit of things with it that you have to comply with.
Absolutely. So typically this happens in bite cases. The officer will go out on a bite case. There's a bite. There are 3 separate classifications or qualifications for a dog to be declared dangerous. It's a significant bite. The person was significantly scared of the animal. I'm just kind of talking off the cuff here. I'm not giving the exact ordinance, but this is it's the dangerous dog ordinance for the state of Georgia. And what happens with these what happens with this, the officer comes out, he'll designate the dog as dangerous. When that's made, then the owner of the dog has 7 days to appeal that classification. If the appeal is not made within those days, then the classification holds. And what that means is a dangerous dog is you have to get an insurance policy on the dog specifically. It's $2,500 or $25,000 a year. You have to make adjustments in your environment to actually keep the dog in the environment. If it's at large, you have to make your fences have to be big enough to keep the dog in. You have to do other things when you take the dog in public. Sometimes you have to have the dog muzzled when it's in public. There's other things that go along with that. And the dog has to be registered as a dangerous dog. So you have to pay a fine and a fee. And that's a yearly fee with your registration tag. With your registration, it's $150.
Okay.
The other thing that if the dog's not neutered or spayed, it has to be neutered or spayed, and it has to be microchipped at that time.
Okay.
So these are all things to do before you get the dog back. Now, that's if you just accept it. If you don't accept it and you want to appeal that, then you file an appeal with Animal Services. It's just a short form that you fill out. And a hearing is conducted. And the hearing involves a hearing officer and 3 representatives from the community. There's just a person at large, someone from the health department, and someone from Animal Services. And it's like a court hearing. You go in and you present your case, and the victim presents their case or whatever. And then that board will decide whether to uphold the classification, to upgrade it to what they call vicious, which requires double the insurance, and then there are other qualifications with a vicious dog, or to throw it out. And in some cases, it really depends on the case whether or not they throw those things out. So that basically in a nutshell is how those things work. And it's not something that we take lightly.
Yeah.
It's not something where we're trying to euthanize the dog because we, as a county agency, we can't mandate euthanasias. But it's more to protect the community from a dangerous dog. If it does it once and it may do it again, we're trying to prevent that from happening again.
So I assume while this process occurs, the dog is being held until a judgment is made, essentially?
Yes, the dog is kept at Animal Services until the decision is made.
Okay. And so when the dog is designated as dangerous, is it has that designation for the remainder of its life?
Absolutely, it does.
Okay.
And there are some, there are stipulations as far as like moving to another county, changing ownership. All these various things have to happen before you move a dangerous dog like that.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yes.
So it's not just an easy thing to have, you say, oh, well, my dog has been classified as a dangerous dog. There's a lot of consequences.
There's a lot of consequences, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It's not something that we take lightly, and it's not something that's easy to do. Mm-hmm. Like the biggest part of it is, and I guess people don't, I get a lot of questions about that. I don't think people understand it to the degree that just because your dog is dangerous doesn't mean it's going to be euthanized.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There are going to be things that you have to go through, and some people can't afford those things. Some people can't handle, can't do the things that are required. And there are a lot of times where people are, well, my dog's not dangerous. Well, in that situation, it was.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, what the gist or the reason for the law is to have responsible dog owners.
Sure. And
we've done a lot of these cases where it's just most of the cases that we see are completely preventable. Mm-hmm. It's what like dogs, they let their dog off a leash to run around. They didn't keep the door closed. They knew the dog was dangerous, and the dog got past them at their front door and bit somebody at their front yard. Those kind of things. And it's just people need to be responsible.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. So have there been instances where the dog is designated as dangerous and the owner still, I guess, is it more careful with the dog and then it bites someone else again? What happens then?
In those cases, those dogs are automatically declared vicious. Okay. We haven't had any of those happen in Chatham County since I've been here.
That's great.
Because typically they're pretty, it's, a lot of times these dogs that bite they're never really spec to the owner. I mean, a lot of those dogs are euthanized because one, they can't afford this, or they don't want to do it, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But typically, what happens with dogs that are declared dangerous is if they violate anything with the dangerous classification, then most of the time they're just basically promoted to vicious, or we take the dog.
Okay. And with a vicious classification, what occurs there? You said that was a higher insurance?
Yes, that's the higher. It's $50,000 versus $25,000.
Oh, wow.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
And the premiums on that probably aren't cheap.
No, they're not.
Well,
no, it's unfortunately that it has to happen. I think that it's the only way they could come up with to fairly treat these people that have let their dogs bite people, basically.
No, I think, that's one of those things where you have to be responsible and you have to take ownership of your dog and what your dog is doing.
Right.
And sometimes I know with my dogs can be a little rambunctious and stuff. And I often say to my husband, you can't let her nibble on you because then she's going to bite somebody and she's going to be a dangerous dog eventually. But a lot of that comes back to training and how you interact with your pets. But then there are dogs that are just, they're aggressive in nature and they're going to have to be dealt with.
Right.
But what other things besides this does Animal Services do?
We provide rabies tags for the public. We register all the animals that are in Chatham County. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the big things that we do. Whenever you get your dog vaccinated, you bring your rabies certificate with you to the shelter. You get a rabies tag. Sometimes some veterinarians in the county, you can look at our website and they'll tell you that some veterinarians actually give you the tags. We keep track of the registration. We're responsible for taking in all the strays. And that's, one of the questions I get a lot is when we do pick up an animal that's a stray animal and it's owned. Mm-hmm. Well, when you come to pick up your animal, there are fees involved with that.
Okay.
There's an impound fee. There's a boarding. It's impound is $35. Boarding per day is up to $20, depending on whether it is.
Mm-hmm.
So your dog's been there for 5 days. It could be $100.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing that we do is every dog that comes into the shelter unknown is vaccinated. We give them distemper vaccine, Bordetella vaccine, and they're dewormed. It's more of a herd health kind of thing for the shelter, but that goes back to the fees that you have to pay if your animal is found at large. So we have a lot of people that will say, well, I don't understand. I didn't let my dog be at large. Well, your dog, you weren't responsible enough to keep it from not being.
Right.
So you have to pay these fees. And that sometimes shocks people when they get there to pick up their stray dog that they have to pay. But that's part of our care. I mean, with these dogs are in our care. We're feeding, we're cleaning up after them, we're vaccinating them, providing veterinary care if they need it.
Right. And this is all taxpayer funding
that
goes into animal services. So charging those fees on the other side is only fair.
Right. And it's significantly cheaper than you would get at a veterinarian for boarding your dog. So
absolutely.
So there's that.
And I'm just going to be honest, every one of my pets, if they got out and were at large and got picked up, I'd pay whatever I had to get them back. They're my babies. Mm-hmm. I know you would feel the same way about Zelda.
Well, and I wanted to mention, because this was we talked about this in a previous episode. You mentioned that if there's a microchip and they're picked up by someone at Animal Services, a lot of times they can just be dropped back off.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So that can prevent those.
That prevents those fees.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, if it is something where it's the same day type thing, or 24 hours, or there's some extenuating circumstances regarding this, then sometimes the fees can be waived.
Yeah,
it doesn't happen a lot, but it does. And I think one of the things that we're working on is actually if people will come into compliance with spay and neutering their animals, we will sometimes waive the fees there. But it surprises me sometimes to know that people don't realize the fees, and then I can't pay it, so then they don't come. The animal's still there, and they wait 3 or 4 more days and they come back. Well, I can pay it now. Well, it's 10 more. It's $30 more now,
right?
And they just don't get that. And I think that's it's frustrating for people. But one of the things I will say is with the stray hold. Stray hold's 5 days. So what that means is after the 5 days of an animal being there, it legally becomes the property of Chatham County.
Right.
We have a lot of people that come in on day 7, day 8, and say, "Oh, I just found, I just realized that's my dog." Most of those times we turn, it's the same thing. They're still there, so they can still pick them up. But the problem with that is, if something happens, because on day 5 it becomes our property, those dogs may be sent to a rescue. They may be adopted.
Right.
And so once that happens, there's really no legal way for you to get your dog back.
Right.
And we've had cases where we've made exceptions, and we've had cases where things happen, but in most cases, that's just, it becomes our property. Whoever takes it next time.
Right.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, in the state of Georgia, animals are property, so that happens. Same thing with cats after 3 days, and that's one of the things we kind of struggle with cats, is because people that have outside cats may not look for their cat.
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
For 2 or 3 days because he didn't come home, because most cats eat at 7 different places.
Right.
So sometimes they don't look, but what we try to do is have we have record of them being there. When people bring cats in, we take pictures, lost pet stuff. So people just need to be aware and keep an eye on where their animals are.
Abby, any final thoughts for this episode?
No, I think that pretty much covers my questions that I had regarding other services that are provided.
Nicholas, any final thoughts for you today?
No, I think I'm good. I think Dr. Harper covered everything.
Dr. Harper, final thoughts?
Just that if you have I was going to talk about priority calls real quick.
Okay.
Priority calls are dangerous animals, injured animals, and animals that have bitten somebody. Those are the 3 big ones. Those take priority. Those are something that we respond to overnight. If you call us at 6, if you have something happen at 7 o'clock at night, you call 911. They get our officer on call. They come, the police department, and we will come out on those emergency things. The other things like animals in traps or like dogs at large, those type things that are just kind of run around your neighborhood.
Right.
Those are less priority calls, and those are stuff that we handle during the day.
Yeah, during normal business hours.
8 to 5. So I just wanted to get that right. And that's, we can either be, typically people call the non-emergency line or they call us our line directly because we have a dispatcher that works at the shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good to call that 527. I always forget the number, 652-5275.
Okay.
To call that number to get in touch with somebody.
And that number is also on our website.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to chathamcountyga.gov, click on residents, and then animals and pets, and you can find that number, and all the information that we've pretty much talked about in our podcast is there. I have one final thought, and that is I want to thank the staff at the shelter. You guys do a very hard job having to work with animals, sometimes animals that are not in good health, animals that seem like they're unwanted. And that's a very hard job, and you guys you get a bad rap as the dog catcher or
right.
animal control. But our animal services staff is very caring. They do love the animals. They want to see them find homes. So I encourage people to go into animal services, look through the animals, make sure that if you have a lost or missing animal that it isn't there. But also encourage people to come adopt. And while you're there, thank the shelter staff. You guys do an incredibly hard job, and we really, truly appreciate it. It's a service that is needed to this county and to our residents.
Thank you. I'll tell them they do an excellent job. And I tell you, it's not an easy job. When I always say this, and it's become kind of a joke, but it's not. When I first started as a veterinarian, and they'd bring straight, and I'd look at these animals they're bringing in, I always look at them like, this is somebody's dog.
Mm-hmm.
They come in with a collar on. They come in, look like they just got groomed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, this is somebody's dog. And then the stock answer was like, yeah, they're all somebody's dog.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something, it shocks me every day. But I think that, dealing with what we deal with, I think we do a relatively good job. And the staff does a really good job holding it together and doing what we need to do every day.
Well, I just wanted to thank you because sometimes it's a thankless job. And they really need to know that they are appreciated. So, all right. Well, if you need any more information about animal services, you can head to the website, or you guys can call the office during normal business hours. They can answer your questions. And we hope to see you again next time on The Chat.